What if your breakup isn't a sign that something went wrong, but a sign you've been pulled into a deeper spiritual reset you didn't expect? Most people think heartbreak is random, chaotic, and personal, but there is a pattern underneath it. There are 7 stages after a breakup, and most people get stuck in just one of them without even realizing it. Most people think they are in stage 5, but they are actually stuck in stage 2. And that's why the pain won't go away. And here's the part that changes everything. One of these stages feels like healing, but it quietly keeps you emotionally attached to the past. If you can recognize where you are, your entire experience of this breakup starts to shift. Heartbreak is not just emotional, it is a full system reset of your inner world. It affects your thoughts, your body, your habits, and your sense of identity all at once. That's why it feels so overwhelming, like your entire life has been turned upside down. You might feel like you're losing control, overthinking everything, or replaying memories you cannot stop. And in divorce recovery or breakup moments like this, most people think something is wrong with them. But trust in this dating advice for women, nothing is wrong with you. You are moving through an energetic adjustment where your attachment to another person is slowly being released, so you can return to yourself. As we go through these 7 stages, don't try to judge where you are. Just notice what feels familiar, because awareness is the first shift that changes everything.
Before we go deeper into each one, here is the full map. After a breakup, people move through Stage 1, Ambivalence. Stage 2, Denial. Stage 3, Bargaining. Stage 4, Anger. Stage 5, Grief and the Void. Stage 6, Acceptance. Stage 7, Growth and Renewal. Now here's what most people miss. These stages of how to heal from a divorce or breakup are not linear. You can move forward, then slip backward, then jump ahead, all in the same week. But there is one stage that quietly traps people for the longest time, and we'll get to that soon. There was a woman we worked with who was completely heartbroken after her relationship ended suddenly. She couldn't stop searching for answers. She checked social media constantly. She reread old messages. She asked mutual friends what went wrong to cause the breakup. We call this the detective phase. When we look at the energy of heartbreak, we almost always see the detective phase. It's that exhausted state where you're trying to solve a spiritual mystery with physical evidence, like social media or old texts. On the surface, it feels like spiritual healing, like you are trying to understand what happened. But energetically, something very different is happening. She wasn't gaining clarity. She was staying emotionally tied to the connection. The more she searched, the more confused and drained she felt. The shift happened when we shared the love advice that the answers aren't out there, they are in the energy you're leaving behind. When she stopped chasing answers, the emotional noise got quieter. Not because the situation changed, but because she finally stepped out of the loop. And that's when something powerful returned. Her own voice, her intuition, her sense of self. This is the beginning of real spiritual healing, when you stop trying to solve the past and start returning to yourself. If you enjoy deep relationship advice, please like and subscribe. The first stage is ambivalence. This is where your mind is split. One part of you knows the relationship is over. Another part ignores breakup advice and still reaches for it emotionally. You can feel strong one moment and completely undone the next. Then comes denial. This is not weakness. The love advice here is that it is protection. Denial gives your nervous system time to adjust to a reality it was not ready for. You might wake up and forget for a second that things have changed. You might expect a message that never comes, or feel like part of you is still living in the old timeline. But underneath it all, Your system is reorganizing. Slowly, it is learning how to heal from a breakup and exist without that attachment. And when denial starts to fade, the emotional weight begins to land, which leads to the next stage. Bargaining is where things get very emotional. This is the stage where people try to negotiate with life. If I change, they might come back. If I stay patient, maybe this will work out. If I ignore my needs, I can keep them. We often notice a specific fear of the void during this stage. It's that moment where you'd rather stay in a painful connection than face the silence. We've observed this pattern often, where someone is willing to completely reshape themselves just to avoid loss. Even broken-hearted women who considered arrangements that went against their own values just to keep the connection alive. But what they were really afraid of was not losing the person. It was facing the emptiness underneath, not believing there could be breakup healing. And this is what bargaining reveals. It shows you where you have been abandoning yourself and most breakup advice to avoid emotional pain. The turning point comes once that energetic pattern is identified. The bargaining loses its power because you finally see that you aren't fighting for love, you're just fighting against emptiness.
In our dating advice for women, anger is often misunderstood. People think it is destructive, but in reality, it is clarity rising to the surface. This is the stage where your system starts to reject what hurt you. You might feel angry at the other person, or at yourself, or at the situation. But underneath it, something important is happening. Your energy is separating from what no longer belongs to you. Anger creates movement. It breaks emotional attachment that denial and bargaining could not release. But there is one important warning here. If anger turns into constant replay, it becomes a loop instead of a release. The goal is not to stay in anger. The goal is to let it move through you and complete itself. Because after anger comes something much quieter and much deeper. This is the stage most people fear the most, the silence, the emptiness, the feeling of loss that finally settles in fully. One client described it as feeling like the ground had disappeared beneath her. Nothing felt solid anymore. But when we look at this stage from a spiritual perspective, we don't see a collapse, we see a sacred period of rest and breakup healing. A psychic can see what the viewer cannot, that the emptiness is actually a clearing for something better. There is a beautiful perspective we often share during this stage. You are not being punished, you are being fallowed. Just like a field that must rest, to grow again, your soul is in a sacred period of restoration. The heaviness isn't a sign of failure, it's a sign of a deep internal reorganization. Like a field after harvest, empty but not broken. The message she received was simple. You are not being punished, you are being emptied so you can be renewed. In this stage, you are not meant to fix anything. You are meant to feel, to slow down, to allow the emotional weight to move through and release. And over time, the heaviness begins to shift. Not suddenly, but gently. Before we move into the final stages, there are two common patterns that keep people stuck. The first is breaking no contact. Every message, every check, every just curious moment pulls you back into the emotional loop. It does not restart the relationship, it restarts the attachment. The second is idealizing the past. Your mind begins to edit reality. It shows you only the good moments and hides the reasons it ended. Healing requires truth, not fantasy, not denial, just truth. Because truth is what releases attachment. Acceptance is not about being happy it happened. It is about no longer resisting what is already true. Something softens here. The emotional charge begins to fade. You can think about the past without feeling pulled under by it.
One client described it as finally being able to breathe again. Not because everything was perfect, but because she was no longer fighting reality. This is where your focus begins to shift from "why did this happen to me?" to "what is this teaching me?" And that question changes everything. Because now you are no longer stuck in the past. You are moving toward understanding. The final stage is growth. The bridge between acceptance and growth is a shift in your energetic minimum. You stop accepting crumbs of attention because your soul has remembered its own value. This isn't something you do, it's something you become as the healing completes itself. This is where life begins to open again, not because you forced it, but because you are no longer resisting it. You start reconnecting with yourself, your interests, your energy, your identity outside of the relationship. One client described this stage as feeling like she was meeting herself again for the first time. And from that space, something new becomes possible. Not because you are looking for it, but because you are finally aligned with yourself. And that is often when healthier love appears. Not as something you chase, but as something that meets you where you already are. Healing from a breakup is not about forgetting someone. It is about remembering yourself. It is about releasing what was never meant to define you forever. If you are in any of these stages right now, know this: you are not stuck. You are moving. Even when it feels slow, something inside you is shifting. Allow yourself to feel what you feel. Allow yourself to learn what you need to learn. And trust that this is not the end of your story. It is the transition into a stronger version of it. If this video helped you recognize where you are, you can share it in the comments. Sometimes naming the stage is the first step toward leaving it. And if you need deeper guidance through your own situation, the advisors at Predict My Future are here to help you understand what your intuition has been trying to tell you all along. You are not alone in this process. And even now, your future is still unfolding in ways you cannot yet see. But it is still yours, and it is still waiting. Share this video to help someone else understand this breakup healing process.